When London police stormed an old warehouse on the city's outskirts, they expected to find smuggled goods. Instead, they discovered 17 exhausted migrants locked in a dark room. That raid marked the beginning of an investigation that would soon uncover one of Europe's most disturbing criminal empires. At its center, Ahmed Ebid, a man who turned human suffering into a global business. His network spanned 3 continents and thousands of victims. And before we begin, please support my channel. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay active. It will help a lot. Thank you. I remember that morning clearly. London hadn't yet woken up. The streets of East End were shrouded in a thick, grey fog frozen in time, but inside an old industrial warehouse on the city's edge, a major operation was unfolding. Under quiet radio commands and the soft steps of tactical boots, the climax of a months-long investigation had begun. The target, a little-known Egyptian man named Ahmed Ebid. When we breached the building, the upstairs office was empty. But in the basement, behind a set of steel doors without windows, we found something far more disturbing. 17 people, women, teenagers and men, were sleeping on the floor of a locked, windowless room. No heating, no documents, no past. The stench of mold, sweat, and fear filled the air. Some were disoriented. Others begged us not to hurt them. Social workers and interpreters arrived within the hour. The interviews began. The migrants described their journey: Egypt, Libya, Italy, France, and finally the UK, via secret routes and dangerous crossings. They'd been smuggled in trucks, shipping containers, even boats. Each delivery cost someone thousands of pounds. We also found records, ledgers filled with numbers, transfer codes, and a recurring name: Ahmed Ebid. The office was disguised as a logistics firm, but the paperwork told a darker story. At the time, we had no idea how far the thread stretched, but we knew this was more than a local trafficking ring. What we had stumbled upon was the front end of a transnational operation, one that left behind a trail of missing persons, broken lives, and unimaginable profit. The name that no one dared say out loud became the centerpiece of our case file. The hunt for Ebid had begun, and the deeper we dug, the darker it got. The name was Egyptian, the documents British, his appearance unremarkable. Ahmed Ebid was the kind of man you'd pass on the street without a second glance, but behind that forgettable face was the mastermind of one of Europe's most expansive human trafficking networks. Born in Alexandria in the early 1980s, little is known about Ebid's early life. His father died young, and his mother worked as a nurse. In 2001, he obtained a UK visa and moved to Birmingham on a student program, but he quickly dropped out and slipped underground. At first, he was just someone who arranged documents. Then he became a broker, connecting desperate migrants with illegal transporters. He never got his hands dirty. His weapon was influence. By the mid-2000s, Ebid began assembling a core group, mostly men from Egypt, Algeria, and Sudan. He didn't have an army, but he had loyalty. Through shell companies, he began employing migrants. On paper, they worked in factories or hotels. In reality, they were locked in basements, forced to work 14 to 16 hours a day without pay, under threat of violence. After the Arab Spring in 2011, Ebid saw an opportunity. As war and chaos engulfed the Middle East and North Africa, migration exploded. He expanded rapidly, creating supply routes from Egypt through Libya, across the Mediterranean, and into Europe. With every new wave of refugees, his wealth grew. Ebid used fake identities, cryptocurrencies, burner phones. He never stayed in one place more than a few days. Some said he operated from Egypt, others pointed to Germany. But as we later discovered, his main operations were based right in the UK. Our first real lead came from a company called Blue Crescent Logistics in Luton. The name was innocuous, but the IP address had been linked to messages discussing groups of 8 and pickup points in Calais. Money transfers connected to illegal couriers flowed through its accounts. The listed owner? A. Ebid. He didn't just smuggle people, he built a business on desperation, turning human misery into millions. all while hiding in plain sight until someone made a mistake. Human trafficking isn't chaos. It's logistics, it's structure, it's business. And Ahmed Ebid ran his like a corporation, transnational, efficient, and nearly invisible. His system turned people into product, routes into revenue, and fear into control. It all started in Egypt. There, local agents, often the same men who once smuggled refugees across the Mediterranean, gathered recruits. The pitch was simple: work in Europe, legal documents, a place to live. Families paid anywhere from £3,000 to £10,000, sometimes in full, sometimes as debt to be worked off. From there, the journey continued through the Sinai into Libya, where makeshift camps outside Tripoli held dozens, even hundreds, awaiting their turn. Smugglers moved them by night across the sea. GPS coordinates were exchanged. In Italy, receivers picked them up. Drivers, handlers, runners, often tied to Balkan or North African gangs. From southern Italy, the network branched out: Austria, Slovenia, Germany. Fake IDs, bribes, cash in envelopes. The route split into two main arteries. One led to France, specifically the migrant camps in Calais and Dunkirk, where they waited for the final, illegal jump to the UK, stuffed into trucks, containers, even hidden compartments. The other led to Germany and Belgium, where they were deployed to farms, warehouses, or sweatshops. The UK was the end of the line. In rented homes and makeshift bunkers, people were stored like cargo. Many were forced into overnight cleaning crews, car washes, construction sites, or sex work. Escape was nearly impossible. If they tried, their families were threatened. Money flowed back through offshore accounts in Cyprus, the UAE, the Virgin Islands. It was laundered through car dealerships, pawn shops, even translation services. Ebid never met victims directly. He operated through layers of middlemen, many unaware of the full scale of his operation. He piggybacked off existing smuggling routes, often partnering with those already moving drugs or counterfeit goods. Migrants were simply added cargo. There was no paper trail. Phones were changed constantly. Crypto kept it clean. His system wasn't just illegal, it was engineered to be untouchable. But like all great machines, it relied on discipline. And when one driver made a fatal mistake, the whole structure began to shake. The numbers were horrifying. Between 2015 and 2022, investigators estimated that over 3,000 people passed through Ahmed Ebid's network. The real number, we suspected, was far higher. Most had no names in any system, only stories buried in fear, silence, and trauma. I remember Mahmoud, a 14-year-old boy from Sudan. He was found unconscious in the back of a van in northern France, abandoned after nearly suffocating in a sealed compartment. A local farmer called emergency services. After weeks in a hospital, he finally spoke. His family had paid £4,500 selling their home. He was promised a job in a London garage. Instead, he ended up scrubbing toilets at a construction site. Then there was Sarah from Iraq. She was promised work as a nanny, but ended up trapped in an underground massage parlor in Birmingham. Her phone was taken, she was beaten, and locked inside. A client noticed bruises and called police. She didn't even know what country she was in. Again and again, the pattern repeated. Women forced into brothels. Teenagers into forced labor. Men into backbreaking warehouse jobs or fieldwork. All unpaid, all invisible. Their homes were unheated basements with moldy mattresses and locked doors. Illness went untreated. Complaints brought punishment. Most were too scared to speak out. Some feared for family back home. Others had been threatened with death or deportation. In several cases, traffickers showed victims photos of their parents or siblings to keep them obedient. And all of this took place in the heart of modern Europe. In cities with CCTV, WIFI, and human rights laws, these people were ghosts. In time, a common thread emerged. Victims mentioned a figure behind it all. The doctor, the boss, H. None had seen him. All feared him. We knew they were talking about Ahmed Ebid. The survivors became our key witnesses. Their accounts matched the records we'd found, and with every name, every location, we pulled another thread in Ebid's web. But the breakthrough came not from a witness, but from a mistake, one that cracked the entire machine open. Every empire collapses not from outside attack, but from within. In Ahmed Ebid's case, the crack appeared on a quiet stretch of the M20 highway in Kent, disguised as a traffic accident. It was October 2021. A van swerved unexpectedly and slammed into a guardrail. The driver fled the scene, leaving the vehicle behind. Police responded expecting a routine crash report. What they found inside changed everything. 11 people, 5 teenagers, 2 women, and 4 men were crammed in the back, barely conscious. No ventilation, no light, no water. Temperatures inside exceeded 40 degrees Celsius. One man had already died. The others were rushed to local hospitals, dehydrated and traumatized. During interviews, familiar phrases began to surface. Ebid, the doctor, the Egyptian. All spoke of being picked up in Calais, paying families through WhatsApp, and being promised work in London. The details matched routes from our older investigations. One officer remembered the van's registration. It had appeared in a 2019 case linked to migrant smuggling. We traced ownership to a company called Red Sky Transfers, registered in Luton. On paper, it belonged to a man named Armin Nasser, but his bank account showed wire transfers from an offshore company called EBC Logistics Ltd, based in Dubai. The name tying them all together, Ahmed Ebid. That single van unraveled everything. For the first time, we had not just victims, but paper trails, bank records, phone numbers, GPS data, and physical suspects. When we compared these leads with previous cases and survivor testimonies, a clear picture emerged. What we thought was a loose collection of smugglers turned out to be a vertically integrated network. Routes, handlers, recruiters, shell companies. Ebid had engineered it all. Soon after, Europol and the UK's National Crime Agency launched a joint task force. France, Germany, Italy, and Egypt joined in. The case was codenamed Operation Horizon. Its goal? Take down the architect, not just the runners. And for the first time, we had coordinates, a meeting, a false identity, and a rare mistake from a man who had been a ghost for over a decade. Ahmed Ebid was no longer just a name, he was now the target. The launch of Operation Horizon marked one of the largest international manhunts for human trafficking in decades. Europol led the coordination, but each country had a piece of the puzzle. Our team in the UK handled financial links, shell companies, and logistics, all pointing to one man, Ahmed Ebid. France focused on the migrant camps in Calais, Italy on the Mediterranean route, Egypt on the recruitment points, Alexandria and Port Said. By early 2022, we had 37 locations in the UK flagged as targets: warehouses, fake logistics offices, rental homes in London, Luton, and Birmingham. We intercepted phone calls, traced crypto wallets, and tracked encrypted chat apps. Ebid himself remained out of reach, but his digital footprint began to show. In Egypt, authorities arrested 3 recruiters, men who'd once worked as fixers for smugglers. They provided photos, voice notes, and chat logs that directly linked them to Ebid. One message read, 8 ready for transport. Confirm green light from doctor. The alias matched what victims had told us. In Germany, police detained Ebid's accountant. He had designed the debt transfer system, where each migrant's cost was broken into coded invoices. One file read, TRX 12/BH08 2X ready, invoice E. Forensic analysts decrypted the records and exposed hundreds of similar entries. The biggest break came in February 2022. An anonymous source tipped us off. Ebid was flying to London under a fake Turkish identity to meet a partner. His route? A private jet from Cyprus to London Southend Airport. The passport name? Mustafa Eren. When he landed, we were waiting. He didn't resist. In his bag, 2 encrypted phones, a crypto wallet, a stack of cash, and the fake ID. No weapons, no panic, just silence. That same night, we launched coordinated raids on 19 sites, 14 arrests, thousands of pounds in cash, hard drives, laptops, among them one key laptop, password protected but packed with data. One folder stood out, Hold List 4.8. It contained 214 names marked as in transit, migrants who were, in effect, listed as property, the digital equivalent of a slave ledger. The fantasy of his anonymity was shattered. Ahmed Ebid wasn't just a ghost, he was now evidence. And next came the courtroom. The trial of Ahmed Ebid began in September 2022 at London's Central Criminal Court, better known as the Old Bailey. It lasted nearly 4 months. But this was no ordinary trial. It was a reckoning. A deep, public look into the machinery of modern slavery and the man who built it. The prosecution presented over 600 pages of evidence, financial records, encrypted chats, intercepted calls, GPS tracking, photos of warehouses, underground cells, and victims. The most harrowing pieces were surveillance videos from inside one of Ebid's London facilities, dozens of people crammed on concrete floors, sleeping in shifts, monitored by enforcers. 28 survivors testified. They arrived with security and trauma specialists. Some had never told their stories aloud before. Sarah recounted how she was forced into sex work and threatened with death. Mahmoud spoke of his brother who died during the Channel crossing. Yasmin described being held in a house on the outskirts of Manchester for over 9 months. Ebid's defense claimed he was a scapegoat, a middleman caught in a wider web. They painted him as a victim of Egypt's instability, claiming he had fled persecution. But the digital evidence told another story. Messages about rotating girls, cutting rations, and new stock arriving erased any doubt. On the 3rd week, Ebid broke his silence. He told the court, "People only want a better life. I built the bridge." The judge responded coldly, "You weren't a bridge, you were a jailer." On December 12, 2022, after 9 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty on all counts: human trafficking, slavery, kidnapping, extortion, and money laundering. The sentence: life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. The courtroom fell silent. Some survivors wept, others simply exhaled, finally free from the fear that he would walk. In the following weeks, more arrests were made across Europe. His inner circle was dismantled, but the legacy of what he built, what he destroyed, couldn't be erased with one verdict. One final chapter remained, and it belonged to the victims he left behind. After the verdict, it felt like justice had been served. The mastermind was behind bars. His lieutenants were exposed, the warehouses were locked, the routes disrupted. But the damage left behind by Ahmed Ebid went far beyond criminal charges. By the time of sentencing, over 3,100 victims had been formally identified, but investigators believed the real number was closer to 7,000. Many had vanished into the shadows, lost in black market labor, underground housing, or the waters of the Mediterranean. UK and EU social services were overwhelmed. Thousands of survivors needed housing, legal status, therapy. Many didn't speak English. Most suffered from severe trauma. Some refused to talk to law enforcement at all. They still feared retaliation or simply didn't believe anyone would help. Special rehabilitation programs were created across the UK. Some victims received protected status or emergency visas. Others entered witness protection. The trauma they carried, however, wasn't so easily relocated. Human rights groups described it as a humanitarian crisis hidden inside a criminal case. In Egypt, investigations rippled outward. Corrupt border agents and complicit government workers were arrested. Several mid-level officials resigned. What had seemed like an isolated trafficking ring was, in fact, tied into state failure and systemic silence. But the name Ahmed Ebid became symbolic. Media dubbed him the modern slave king. His story was the subject of documentaries, exposés, and parliamentary inquiries. In schools and legal debates, his name came up not as a case, but as a warning. Years later, his system still casts a shadow. Survivors continue to come forward. Bank accounts connected to his empire keep appearing. His encryption methods are studied by cybersecurity analysts. Even in prison, he remains a case study for how modern trafficking can exist right under society's nose. Ahmed Ebid's empire is gone, but the scars remain. On nations, on law, on people. And for those of us who hunted him down, one thing is clear. The fight didn't end with his arrest. It only began.